Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Layak Sadiqi, the father of Holophase, part 46. Meaning begins. Interpretation as pattern to pattern usefulness. We began with one insight. Pattern is primary. Phi is circular comparability, the root permission for distinction. Only relations are public. Identity is invariance under lawful transformation. Persistence is certified survival through change. Interaction is joint constraint. Time is ordered transformation. No ex nihilo. Every appearance has provenance. The observer is a pattern within pattern reality. Measurement produces traces. Memory stabilizes them. Models compress structure. Prediction narrows lawful futures. Learning updates structure while preserving identity. Intervention alters coupling. Computation transforms patterns under rules. Information is constrained on possibility. Publicness makes knowledge shareable. Scale determines what becomes visible. Coarse graining moves between scales with declared loss. Emergence reveals new patterns at new scales. Self-modeling turns patterns toward themselves. Now we ask, what makes a pattern meaningful? The most loaded word. Of all the words we have encountered on this journey, none carries more baggage than meaning. People speak of the meaning of life, the meaning of words, the meaning of art, the meaning of existence. The word is used as if it names a mysterious substance, something that floats above the world, attaching itself to some things and not others. But our discipline has been consistent from the first step. If a word makes us imagine a hidden fluid, we stop and ask what public structure that word is actually pointing to. So in this part, we do not deny that meaning exists. We simply reread it. Meaning is not a primitive substance. It does not enter Phi pattern science as a fundamental ingredient. Meaning emerges when one pattern structure becomes predictively or usefully constraining for another pattern system. Meaning is relational and functional, not intrinsic essence. A pattern can exist without being meaningful to a given observer pattern. Meaning is not a property of the pattern alone. It is a property of the pattern-observer relation. The same pattern may be meaningful to one observer and meaningless to another. A book written in a language we cannot read carries patterns, ink, pages, words, but it does not constrain our expectations, guide our actions, or coordinate our behavior. It is not meaningful to us. For a fluent reader, the same book is deeply meaningful. It changes what they expect, how they act, what they believe. Meaning is not in the book. It is in the relation between book and reader. A simple everyday example, the stop sign. A red octagon with white letters stands at a street corner. To someone who has never encountered traffic signs, it is just a colored metal shape. It carries no meaning. It does not constrain their behavior. To a driver who knows the rules of the road, the same sign is deeply meaningful. It predicts, if you do not stop, something bad may happen. It controls, you must stop. It coordinates, all drivers at this intersection will act in a predictable way. The sign's meaning is not in the metal or the paint, it is in the relation between the sign and the driver, a relation built on training, convention, law, and shared practice. The sign exists as a pattern. Its meaning is what it does in the life of the driver. Another example, the spoken word. A child hears the word hot for the first time. It is just a sound, a pattern of vibrations in the air. The child touches a hot stove. Pain. The word hot is uttered again. Now the sound has meaning. It predicts. If something is described as hot, touching it may cause pain. It controls. The child avoids touching hot things. It coordinates. caregivers can warn the child. The meaning is not in the sound, it is in the relation between the sound and the child's experience, a relation built on association, memory, and consequence. What meaning is not? Because meaning is so often misused, we must be very clear about what it is not. Meaning is not a primitive substance. It is not a mysterious fluid that attaches itself to some patterns and not others. Meaning is not intrinsic. A pattern does not carry meaning all by itself, independent of any observer. Meaning is not in the pattern alone. It is in the relation between pattern and observer. Meaning is not magic. It does not float free of lawful interaction. It is grounded in prediction, control, coordination, and inference. Meaning is not explanation. Saying it means X does not explain anything unless we specify what functional role X plays for whom. Meaning is derived, relational, functional. It is always meaning for some pattern system. Meaning as relational and functional. Let us define meaning clearly. Meaning emerges when one pattern structure becomes predictively or usefully constraining for another pattern system. Meaning is always relational. It involves at least two patterns, the meaningful pattern and the observer pattern. Functional, it does something. It enables prediction, control, coordination, or inference. Grounded, it is anchored in lawful interactions, not floating free. A pattern has meaning for an observer when it changes what the observer can do, what it can predict, how it can act, how it can coordinate with others, what it can infer about absent patterns. 4 types of meaning. Meaning manifests in several functional roles. Predictive meaning. Pattern A constrains what pattern B expects. A weather forecast predicts rain. For the person who hears it, the forecast has predictive meaning. It changes what they expect tomorrow. Control meaning. Pattern A enables pattern B to steer. A recipe controls a cook's actions. For the cook following it, the recipe has control meaning. It guides what they do. Coordinative meaning. Pattern A aligns pattern B with others. A traffic light coordinates drivers. For drivers approaching the intersection, the light has coordinative meaning. It synchronizes their behavior. Inferential meaning. Pattern A supports reasoning about absent patterns. A fossil supports inferences about ancient life. For a paleontologist, the fossil has inferential meaning. It reveals what is not directly present. Each type is a different functional role. Each is meaning. An example across scales, the honeybee dance. A honeybee returns to the hive and performs a waggle dance. The dance is a pattern, movements in space, vibrations, orientation. Other bees observe the dance. For them, the dance has meaning. Predictive, it tells them where to find flowers. Control, it guides their flight. Coordinative, it aligns the foraging efforts of many bees. Inferential, it conveys information about nectar sources not directly visible. The dance is meaningful for the observing bees. For a human watching without knowledge of bee communication, it is just bee movement, pattern without meaning. Meaning is in the relation between dance and observer. 8. A pattern can exist without meaning. Here is a crucial point. A pattern can exist without being meaningful to a given observer pattern. The book in a language you do not read exists. Its patterns are real, but it is not meaningful to you. The fossil in the rock existed for millions of years before any paleontologist saw it. It had no meaning. It was just pattern. Meaning is not a property of the pattern alone. It is a property of the pattern-observer relation. This is why we cannot say this pattern contains meaning without specifying contains meaning for whom, under what conditions, for what function. Meaning remains grounded even at higher layers. Language, art, culture. Meaning remains grounded in lawful Phi pattern interactions and constraints. Meaning is not floating free. It is always anchored in lawful interaction, how patterns couple; constraint, what possibilities are narrowed; uncertainty reduction, what predictions improve; coordination success, how well systems align; functional improvement, whether the observer's capabilities are enhanced. A poem may have multiple layers of meaning, but each layer is grounded in the relation between the poem's patterns and the reader's cognitive patterns, patterns shaped by language, culture, experience. Meaning is not mystical, it is functional. An example, the thermometer reading. A thermometer reads 20 degrees Celsius. For a person checking the weather, the reading has predictive meaning. It tells them what to expect outside. It has control meaning. It guides whether they wear a coat. For a thermometer itself, the reading has no meaning. It is just a state. For a person who does not understand temperature scales, the number 20 is just a pattern, no meaning. Meaning is not in the number. It is in the relation between the number and the observer's functional needs. 11. Meaning and usefulness. Meaning is tied to usefulness. If a pattern does nothing for an observer, does not improve prediction, does not enable control, does not coordinate, does not support inference, then it is not meaningful to that observer. This does not mean meaning is purely subjective. Usefulness can be objective. A pattern either does or does not improve prediction for a given observer under given conditions. That is testable. Meaning is objective, in the same way that a key either does or does not open a lock. The key's usefulness depends on the lock, but given the lock, the fit is a fact. Meaning is usefulness relative to an observer's functional needs. An example, the key. A key has a pattern, a specific shape cut into metal. For a lock with a matching pattern, the key is meaningful. It enables control, opening the door. For a different lock, the same key is meaningless. It does nothing. The key's meaning is not in the metal. It is in the relation between key and lock. A garden example. Imagine walking through a garden with three different observers. The first is a toddler. The second is a gardener. The third is a bee. They all encounter the same yellow flower. For the toddler, the flower may be meaningful as something bright and interesting to point at. For the gardener, it may be meaningful as a sign that soil conditions are improving or that pollination is succeeding. For the bee, it is meaningful as a nectar source, a landing target, and a cue in a pollination pattern. Same flower, same world, different meaning relations. This shows three things at once. First, meaning is not intrinsic to the flower alone. Second, meaning can differ across observer patterns without becoming arbitrary. Third, the differences are grounded in each observer's organization, needs, models, and capacities. Meaning is therefore neither a private ghost nor a fixed essence in the object. It is a lawful role between patterns. Meaning and information. Earlier, we defined information as constraint on possibility. That now becomes vital. Meaning can be understood as a higher order role built from information. A pattern carries information insofar as it constrains possibilities. It becomes meaningful when those constraints become usefully active within another pattern system. In other words, information is about constrained possibility. Meaning is about the functional use of those constraints. Let us make this concrete. A thermometer reading of 39 degrees Celsius constrains possibilities about body temperature. That is information. For a doctor, parent, or immune regulating medical system, that information becomes meaningful when it guides inference, intervention, or concern. That is meaning. So, meaning is not separate from information, but it is not identical to bare information either. Meaning is what happens when constraint becomes functional in a pattern life. Meaning requires an observer pattern. Because meaning is relational, every meaning claim must specify the observer pattern or recipient pattern for whom the pattern is meaningful. A map means something to a traveler, not to a stone. A pollen scent means something to an insect, not to a parked bicycle. A legal sentence means something to a court system, not to a falling raindrop. This is not because the stone, bicycle, or raindrop are lesser beings in some moral sense. It is because they do not have the relevant organizational architecture to use the pattern in the required way. The system must be capable of being constrained by the pattern. This is why observerhood matters so much in the architecture of meaning. An observer pattern is not a magical witness standing outside reality. It is a pattern system with memory, sensitivity, modeling capacity, and pathways of adjustment. Meaning exists only relative to such organized recipients. The same pattern may be meaningful to one observer and not to another. This follows naturally, but it deserves emphasis because it is often ignored. The same pattern may be deeply meaningful to one observer and functionally meaningless to another. A musical score means something rich to a trained musician and almost nothing to someone who cannot read music. The smell of smoke means urgent danger to a firefighter and perhaps only mild curiosity to a child at a campsite. A line of code means actionable instruction to a computer and visual noise to someone who has never seen programming before. A hormone molecule means regulatory instruction to a living cell with the right receptor and absolutely nothing to a grain of sand. So, meaning is selective. It depends on whether there is a fitting relational channel between the pattern and the system. This is one of the strongest reasons we must not treat meaning as intrinsic essence. If it were intrinsic in that way, it would affect all systems equally by simple presence. But that is not what we observe. Meaning in the body. Before moving toward language and symbols, it helps to see that meaning begins much lower than human speech. Inside the body, many patterns are already meaningful in the functional sense. A falling blood sugar level is meaningful for metabolic control systems. A hormone concentration is meaningful for target cells with matching receptors. An inflammatory signal is meaningful for immune coordination. Pain is meaningful for withdrawal, protection, and learning. The body is full of pattern-to-pattern usefulness relations. A molecule does not need poetry in order to be meaningful to a cell. It needs to constrain what the cell should do next. This is a powerful reminder that meaning, at its beginning, is not mystical at all. It is deeply biological, operational, and embodied. Later, at higher scales, meaning becomes richer, more abstract, and more symbolic. But the root logic is already here. A formula for meaning. We can compress the logic into a simple statement. Let pattern A be the candidate meaningful pattern. Let system B be the observer or recipient pattern. Then we can say, meaning of A for B exists when A improves B's lawful prediction, control, coordination, or inference within a declared context. This is not a mathematical equation in the narrow sense, but it is a rigorous statement structure. If someone claims a pattern is meaningful, we can ask, for what system? In what context? By what role? What measurable improvement does it produce? How is that improvement demonstrated? This turns meaning into something that can be disciplined rather than merely admired or declared. The meaning principle. Now we can state the principle that organizes part 46. Meaning is a higher order role played by Phi patterns in the life of other Phi patterns, not a separate substance. This means meaning is relational, not intrinsic. Meaning is functional, not mystical. Meaning requires an observer pattern. Meaning is grounded in prediction, control, coordination, inference. Meaning is tied to usefulness, improved capabilities. 20. The rigor layer, the meaning. Gate. Meaning gets its own gate, the meaning gate. The meaning gate asks, is the meaning type declared? Predictive, control, coordinative, inferential? Is the observer pattern specified? For whom is this pattern meaningful? Are usefulness criteria defined? What does the pattern do for the observer? Is the meaning grounded in lawful interactions? How does it constrain or inform? Is meaning treated as intrinsic to the pattern alone or as relational? If the answer is no, if meaning type is missing, if observer is unspecified, if usefulness is undefined, the meaning claim cannot be certified. The meaning gate requires meaning type, predictive, control, coordinative, inferential. Observer specification, the pattern system for which meaning holds. Usefulness criteria, how the pattern improves prediction, control, coordination, inference. Grounding evidence, lawful interactions that support the meaning. Relational attestation, meaning is not intrinsic to the pattern alone. Firewalls, what meaning discipline blocks? Meaning discipline installs several critical firewalls. Firewall 1. No treating meaning as primitive. Meaning is derived, not fundamental. Firewall 2. No attributing meaning to patterns without observer relation. Meaning is always meaningful. Firewall 3. No conflating meaning with intrinsic property. A pattern alone does not carry meaning. Firewall 4. No floating meaning free of ground. Meaning must be anchored in lawful interactions. Firewall 5. No using meaning as explanation without specification. It means X is not enough. What functional role? For whom? Firewall 6. No treating subjective feeling as public meaning claim. Personal significance is not public meaning without functional criteria. These firewalls keep meaning honest. Refusal conditions. We refuse to certify a meaning claim if meaning type is undeclared, observer pattern is unspecified, usefulness criteria are undefined, meaning is treated as intrinsic to the pattern alone, meaning is presented as primitive substance. Refusal here is not pedantry. It is protecting meaning from becoming a magic word. Why this matters, beyond science, meaning in life. Meaning is not only for science, it is for how we live. We all seek meaning. We want our lives to matter, our actions to have point, our experiences to connect to something larger. This search for meaning is real, but it is not a search for a mystical substance floating above the world. Meaning in life, like meaning in pattern science, is relational and functional. It is about the roles we play in the lives of others, the ways our actions constrain and enable, the predictions we fulfill, the coordination we achieve. A life has meaning when it matters to others, when it improves their predictions, enables their control, coordinates their efforts, supports their inferences. Meaning is not something we find, it is something we create through relation, through function, through impact. This does not make meaning less real, it makes it more grounded, more actionable, more connected to how we actually live. A final image: the lighthouse keeper. A lighthouse keeper tends a light on a rocky coast. To the keeper, the light is routine, daily tasks, maintenance, repetition. To sailors at sea, the light is deeply meaningful. It predicts safe passage. It controls their navigation. It coordinates their approach. It infers the presence of shore. The light's meaning is not in the lamp or the lens. It is in the relation between the light and those who depend on it. The keeper's life has meaning through that same relation. We began with comparability. From phi emerged distinction. From distinction emerged pattern. From pattern emerged identity, persistence, interaction, measurement, memory, modeling, prediction, learning, intervention, computation, information, publicness, scale, coarse graining, emergence, self-modeling. And now meaning. Meaning is not a new ingredient. It is the functional role patterns play in the lives of other patterns. It is predictive, control, coordinative, inferential usefulness. It is relational, not intrinsic. It is grounded, not floating. Meaning is what patterns do for each other. We now move forward. With meaning understood, we can ask, how do patterns come to stand for other patterns in stable, shareable ways? That is symbols. That is part 47. Always, peace be upon you.